lady, had went to the doctor. She was having some issues. She went to the doctor. And the doctor ran several tests. And days later, he came back and he called her in and he said, I have some very bad news. He said, you've got something that's inoperable, something that's we don't have the technology to fix this. And he said, young lady, I'm sorry to tell you, he said, you have 2 months to live. So she calls her pastor over to her house. Pastor and his wife came. She sat them down and she said, preacher, and she told them about the doctor's visit. She said, the doctor tells me I have 2 months to live. And they're like, honey, we're so sorry. She said, well, here's what I want to do. She said, I want to plan out my service. And so she began to give them everything. She said, preacher, this is the scripture that I would like read. And he's writing all this down. She said, and she called a few folks in the church. She said, I'd like for this brother to sing, and I'd like for sister so-and-so to sing, and I really love this song, and I'd like to have it played at my funeral. And he said, honey, that's fine. He's writing all this down, and she said, I want you to speak. And she mentioned some other folks. She said, I'd like them to speak at my funeral. And she said, I want to make sure, she said, I want you to make sure that I'm dressed in. And she told him and his wife exactly what she wanted to be dressed in the casket. The preacher's writing all this down. They end their conversation, and the preacher and his wife are getting ready to leave, and she says, preacher, wait a minute, there's one more thing. She said, I want you to, in the casket, I want you to put a fork in my hand. And he said, excuse me? She said, I want you to put a fork in my hand. And he said, young lady, why would you want something like that? She said, preacher, when I was growing up, and she said every once in a while, my mom and dad and myself, we would go out to some fancy restaurant. And we would eat this scrumptious meal. She said the servers would come out to gather our utensils and our, clean up the dirty dishes. And then they would say this, save your fork, because the best is yet to come. I hope you enjoyed your meal, but dessert is on its way out. Save your fork. And that young lady said to that preacher, she said, preacher, when people are coming by that casket and they see me in this outfit and they see that fork in my hand and they ask, why in the world does she have a fork in her hand? I want you to tell them, for this young lady, the best is yet to come.